And now it's time for our first keynote. We're thrilled today to welcome Professor Virginia Dignum here today to share her insights on responsible AI. Now, Virginia is a professor of responsible artificial intelligence at Umeå University, Sweden, and is associated with TU Delft in the Netherlands. She's the director of WASP-HS, the Wallenberg Programme on Humanities and Society for AI, Autonomous Systems and Software, which is the largest Swedish national research programme on fundamental multidisciplinary research on the societal and human impact of AI. She's also a member of the Royal Society, the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, and a fellow of the European Artificial Intelligence Association, as well as a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Council. So it's safe to say Professor Dignum knows things. Without further ado, please put your hands together for Professor Virginia Dignum.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure to be here as well. And indeed, I'm going to talk about responsible artificial intelligence and why care. Why care about trustworthy, ethical, and inclusive AI? What is it and how to implement it? I've been working for 30 years in AI, and starting with the question, of course, what is AI and why all of a sudden all of us are discussing and caring about this seemingly fuzzy concept that no one really can pinpoint how to define it. I've been working for more than 30 years in AI, both in industry and in academia, and what we thought about it 30 years ago is definitely different than what we believe and understand about AI today. So if it's a question, of course, the way to start to answer this question is to ask Google. And Google tells you that AI is blue. And I don't know, there is this workshop later on about images of AI. Maybe you have a reason and understood why AI is blue. I don't know, but it is definitely blue and it's a bit fuzzy, some kind of strange thing. I've been talking with policymakers for a long time, both in Europe and outside, discussing many of the strategies which have been developed around the world. And if you talk with the policymakers, basically the ideas and answers that they give you is that AI is some kind of thing. We know what is the AI and what is not the AI. And it's clearly that we can define the boundary. It is also the idea that AI has an agency by itself, so it can do things. Most times we don't know what it's doing or we don't understand what it's doing, but AI does stuff. Then there is the idea of the user. There is always a user, often, which interacts and is impacted by this AI thing. And, of course, always the data apart. What policymakers also tend to believe is that there will be a technological fix to whatever ill-doings of AI. So we can, if we make sure that technology is okay, then we will make things right. It is, for a large part, many of this is true, but of course is not the whole story. So if we continue in our search to what is AI, indeed, if we talk about the software systems, is about software systems, is about computational systems that are able in one way or another to act autonomously, to adapt and learn from the environment, and to interact with us. But again, this is not the whole story. Then we go into the current discussions in AI, both in scientific as in the media. And the discussions, is it artificial? Is it not? Is it intelligent? Definitely not. Is it an algorithm? Is some magic? And the media will try to make you believe that there is some big component of magic to it. Sorry. Maybe, probably all these questions can be answered with yes and no. And there have been arguments for all of them with yes and no. What I think is the most fundamental aspect that, if you don't get nothing more about my talk today, what is really fundamental to remember is first, AI is about people. It's about those that develop it, it's about those that use it, it's about those that are developed by, affected by it, it's about those that create the policies for it. So it's about people. And without AI systems, the AI applications, the software doesn't exist in a vacuum, doesn't exist alone in a lab or something like that. So when we talk about responsibility in AI, when we talk about the trustworthy, ethical and inclusive aspects of AI, we really need to address this social technical ecosystem, which is the environment, the context in which whatever software we are developing is part of. So it's really about people, it's about those affect, those that use, those that developed, those that create the policies for AI. It's not about the software. What are the concerns then when we talk about why is all this policy and issues and why is at this moment this concern about what AI can or cannot do? There are many concerns, and I can, in the time that I have today, definitely not go into all of them. But big issues and big kind of topics is firstly starting with the idea of data. We, our societies, our world, our environment is more than data alone. Not all can be expressed in data, and moreover, whatever we can express in data is about the past. We never have data about the future. So making predictions, making use of data from the past comes with the responsibility of moving it and taking decisions about the future. It is also a big concern that is the availability of data what is leading and focusing our efforts on AI? Are we focus AI on the problems for which we can easily find data, or are we really focus our efforts on the issues and aspects that really matter to society? And of course, with data comes all the issue of bias and inclusion that I'm sure we'll be discussing today in many, many different ways. So it is about this focus on data and how can we really move forward the idea that all what we need is data. And once we have the data right, then everything will be right. It is also about power. Is about the power of those and the institutions, the organizations, democratic or private, that are developing AI. If you have the power to develop and implementing AI systems, you have the power to determine which AI systems are being developed, how AI systems are being developed, and what for are they being developed. So what are the motivations behind these decisions to use AI? Are those purely economic, or do we want these decisions to be more inclusive and focusing on the democratic process and the democracy? And then another important issue, which is often very ignored, is the issue of sustainability, the cost of developing AI. The more we focus on large computations, large amounts of data, we cannot ignore the fact that these large amounts of data, these large computations, have a huge impact in our environment. The electricity, the energy, the prime materials used to develop these huge data centers are affecting our world, are affecting our climate. And therefore, we cannot separate the AI that we are developing from the cost of the developments that we are doing. So responsible AI is about realizing, yes, we can do a lot of good with AI. But who is going to decide? And when should we use AI? When should we not use AI? Many people are calling this the question zero, the question from which all developments in AI should start is, should we use AI here? And the ones who are deciding, the values behind the ones who take those decisions, the way we deal with prioritizing different values and the dilemmas between values are determine the way that we are dealing with responsibility or not within AI. It's about thinking what are the decisions we really want AI systems to support us, and how should those decisions be taken? Do we want AI to help us planning our lives? Do we want AI to help us deciding on our motives, on our ambitions, on our goals? Do we want AI to benefit all, or do we want AI to benefit each one of us individually? The results are definitely completely different. It's also understanding that we cannot have it all. Most of these large ambitions, these many values that we associate with AI and that we read again and again in guidelines and principles for AI are difficult to reconcile at the same time. It's difficult to ensure security, justice, liberty, and whatever together. We need to make choices. Who is going to make those choices? And how are we going to place these choices in a space in which we know that what society wants or likes is not always what is morally or ethically desirable, and often also not what is legally possible. How are we positioning this? Who is deciding, and how is this decision being made? Are the issues about responsible AI. Responsible AI has been defined, and I take here the definition from the European Commission about ensuring lawfulness, ethical alignment, but also about ensuring that the systems, the computational systems that we are developing are reliable, do what they are supposed to do, are robust, don't break. And another thing which is also especially very important from those that do develop the technology, can we verify that indeed the systems do what we expect them to do? Can we verify that the system is fair? How does that mean? How can we transform that into some computational properties? Those are issues that are at the focus of much of the research today. So if you go back to this idea that AI is about this social technical ecosystem, when we talk about responsible AI, we need to address the whole social technical system, not the technology alone. So it's about when we develop technical systems to be autonomous, we need to develop the capacities for responsibility somewhere in this ecosystem. Not necessarily on the technology, but we need to identify the institutions, the rules, the process, the procedures through which we ensure responsibility, through which we ensure accountability and explanation when the system interacts with people, to ensure transparency and openness when the system is learning and changing and coming to decisions that are results that are not always understandable. It's not just about designing this by design. It's not just about implementing it into the technology. It's also about ensuring that the processes and the criteria and the decisions about when and how and what to design are also done in a responsible way. And it's about ensuring that all stakeholders also understand and take the responsibility that it's due to them in the process and in this ecosystem. This is what often is being called art, the accountability, responsibility, and transparency. So about art, or this responsibility in AI, is for a large part being explicit, being clear about how do we interpret the value of justice and how do we implement it all the way down to the systems that we are building. Do we interpret it as equity? Do we interpret it as equality? How do we implement it given the data and the processes and the resources that we have? Making it explicit, making it open, making it possible for others to inspect and to question, it's for a large part what we need in order to implement and guarantee that systems are being developed in a responsible way. Is about questioning those choices and opening those choices for questioning, for decisions, is also about motivating and documenting what were other options and why do we choose a specific option and not the other. There are many principles and guidelines around the world. Of course, the Scottish guidelines are one of the many, but at this moment there is hardly any organization, large or small in the world, any country, which has not come yet with some type of document, some type of vision about how to use AI in their specific context. It is great because it shows that it's really a concern of many. It might be confusing because you don't really know anymore which one of them. There are so many, a few hundred, which one to choose. The good thing is that they are not so much in contradiction with each other. And they are not so much in contradiction with each other because they are written often in a very abstract, high-level way. It's easy to agree that we want AI systems to be trustworthy, to be inclusive, to be fair, to follow human rights and so on. It's much more difficult to agree how exactly are we going to implement this. So the steps moving from here to the implementation, that's when we start seeing a lot of differences across the world. And when I say it's easy, it's definitely not easy. I've been involved in many of these discussions, and I can guarantee it's not easy, but it's definitely easier than agreeing and coming up with the ways to develop it and to implement it. And there are many ways in which the world are taking efforts to operationalize AI. Of course, there is issues of regulation, and in that European Union with the proposed AI Act is really taking a step forward from many other countries, really taking this human-centered and risk-based approach to regulation to really make sure that there are legal imperatives in which describe what and what cannot be done with AI within Europe. But there is also alternatives. A very good and very big one is the efforts around standards, developing standards as soft governance, as ways to show due diligence by those that apply and take the standard, but also as a way to support the interaction and interoperability across many different products and policies. We see, especially at the level of very large companies, a big effort to develop their own processes, their own organizational structures to ensure that AI ethics, AI responsibility is taken within the organization. There is also a lot of work being done in developing tools and metrics and auditing support to check whether or not we are, an organization is aligned with the guidelines. Of course, responsibility in AI is much more than just checking boxes, but it's a start and it provides a good support for assessing the maturity and the needs of a specific organization. And of course, all of this stands or falls with all efforts around education and training, ensuring that all of us in many different levels and in many different capacities are aware and are able to participate in this very much needed discussion and dialogue about what do we want AI to be for our societies. So finally, just want to finish with two more things. One is that we cannot see AI, we can definitely not see responsible AI, trustworthy, ethical, inclusive AI as an engineering problem, as a technological issue. It is a multidisciplinary issue, and only by integrating efforts from all disciplines, from the humanities, the social science, together with the engineer and the natural science, we will really be able to deal with all the concerns, all the issues, and ensuring that AI is really done and applied in ways that are beneficial for all of us. So we need really to open up AI for inclusivity also in terms of disciplines. And just to finish with the ever-present question, yes, it's great to have all these concerns on the regulation and responsibility, but innovation should be key. Innovation is not about the right to use technology as it is now. Innovation is exactly the possibility to make technology move forward. And how better can we do that than by using trustworthiness, ethical and inclusivity as the beacon, as the direction in which we want the new technology, the technology of the future to move forward. Thank you very much.
So much, Professor. And my microphone has just fallen off, which is
I noticed.
Excellent timing.
Yes.
Thank you so much for those stimulating concepts, issues, ideas. There's been a great question that's come through on the app, which I'll ask you almost verbatim, because I think it's quite well written actually, which is, with technology like machine learning needing millions of data records to function, how do we also ensure responsible data collection? and prevent data grabbing born out of a misbelief that more data is better and that data is objective truth?
Yes, I think it's a great question. It's a question, like I say, we do need to move forward from the idea that more data is better. That has been proven many, many times that you don't get better results out of even the current algorithms by just adding more data. There are cases even in which more data gets to worse results. The point is really to start thinking and to look at alternatives, to explore other ways to deal with algorithmic decision making, to deal with the capabilities of so-called intelligent systems, which are not necessarily based on data as the training, as the input for the decisions that are taken. Of course, we do need to base the decisions on the records and the descriptions of a specific situation. But there are alternatives also in technology that don't require that the algorithm is trained by looking at a million examples of a certain thing. Of course, systems are very good at identifying cats in pictures by checking a million different cats or billions of cats. But we people, those systems don't understand what is the meaning of a cat. They can be perfect at identifying cats, and still the system will not be able to tell you what is really a cat. We are able to understand cats in a completely different way, and I think that we really need to go back to the basics of AI and understanding what makes a system intelligent, what makes an entity intelligent, in order to get out of this kind of being hijacked by the idea that we need data and more data all the time.
Professor Dignum, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you. And now it's time for a caffeine fix, or not, but we're going to have a coffee break for approximately 30 minutes. But it's very important I tell you before you scurry off that when you get back at around 10:30, actually there's going to be concurrent panels and workshops happening at the same time. And so, upstairs in the ozone, you'll see the challenges in healthcare panel. So you need to, sorry, hold on. No, the workshop upstairs is about the goodbye shiny robots, right, which is upstairs in the ozone. Next door, around here in stage 2, is the challenges in healthcare panel. And for everyone else that comes back here to this room, you'll see the startup focus panel starting around 10:30. So please enjoy the break. Please check out the exhibits upstairs. I know the National Robotarium has got a few bots with them. And also on the online platform, you can check out the virtual exhibition on there too. So see you soon.